Commander Hyunwoo stared through the massive viewing window of his spacecraft. Before him hung a beautiful blue and green planet, spinning slowly in the darkness of space. White clouds swirled across its surface like cotton candy, and he could see the brown and green shapes of continents beneath them. This was the third planet from an ordinary yellow star, nothing special about the solar system itself. But as Hyunwoo watched, he noticed something interesting. Tiny lights flickered across the dark side of the planet where night had fallen. These weren't natural lights like lightning or volcanoes. These were artificial lights created by intelligent beings. "Sir, we're picking up radio signals," called out Lieutenant Ye-jin from her position at the sensor controls. Her fingers danced across the glowing buttons and screens as she analyzed the information flowing in. "The signals are primitive but organized, definitely from an intelligent species." Hyunwoo nodded and walked closer to examine the data himself. Radio waves meant technology, technology meant civilization, and civilization meant another world ripe for conquest by the mighty Kethval Empire. The Kethval were not originally from this part of the galaxy. Their homeworld was far away, orbiting a red giant star that had been slowly dying for millions of years. Over time, this had made them a nomadic people, always searching for new worlds to claim and new resources to harvest. They had become very good at it. "What else can you tell me about these creatures?" Hyunwoo asked, settling into his command chair. The chair was made from a rare metal found only on their conquered world of Zephyr Prime, comfortable but imposing. Ye-jin's fingers continued to work as she gathered more information. "They call themselves humans, sir. The species appears to be carbon-based, similar to us but much smaller. They breathe oxygen and need liquid water to survive." "Interesting," Hyunwoo murmured. Most species they encountered had at least some similarities to the Kethval, but humans seemed particularly close to their own biological needs. This would make the planet even more valuable to the Empire. "Their technology level?" he asked. Though he could already guess from the primitive radio signals. "Very basic, sir. They use chemical propulsion for their spacecraft, which barely allows them to leave their planet's atmosphere. We've detected some nuclear fission reactors, but nothing approaching our fusion technology. Their most advanced satellites are simple communication and observation devices." Captain Minho, who had been quietly listening from his position near the navigation controls, let out a small laugh. "Chemical propulsion? They're still burning fuel to push themselves through space? How quaint!" Hyunwoo smiled slightly. The Kethval had left chemical propulsion behind over 1,000 years ago. Their ships now used advanced fusion drives that could cross star systems in weeks rather than years. To them, human technology was like watching children play with wooden toys. "Population count?" Hyunwoo continued his questioning. "Approximately 7 billion individuals scattered across the planet's landmasses," Ye-jin reported. "They appear to be divided into numerous smaller groups or nations, each with their own territories and governments. This was typical of primitive civilizations. Before the Kethval had unified under the Empire centuries ago, they too had been divided into competing nations and tribes. It always made conquest easier when the target species was busy fighting among themselves rather than preparing for external threats. "Any signs they've detected our presence?" asked Captain Minho, moving to stand beside the commander's chair. "None whatsoever, sir. Their sensor technology is far too primitive to detect our cloaked ships at this distance. We might as well be invisible to them." Hyunwoo nodded approvingly. The Kethval cloaking technology was another advantage that made their conquests so successful. They could observe and study their targets for months without being detected, learning everything they needed to know before striking. "Very well," Hyunwoo said, standing up from his chair with an air of finality. "Send a message to Admiral Tae-young. Inform him we've found another suitable world for the Empire's expansion. Primitive species, valuable resources, and no significant military capabilities." He paused and looked back at the blue planet floating peacefully in space. The humans down there had no idea that their entire way of life was about to change forever. They were probably going about their daily routines, completely unaware that alien ships were studying them from the darkness. "Classification?" asked Ye-jin, preparing to send the report. "Standard conquest protocol," Hyunwoo replied with practiced indifference. Another routine subjugation. This will be world number 248 for the Empire. The bridge crew nodded and began preparing their reports. In 3 centuries of expansion across the galaxy, the HFY Empire had conquered 247 different worlds and species. Some had put up fierce resistance, others had surrendered immediately. But all had eventually fallen to the Empire's superior technology and military might. To them, this blue planet called Earth was just another number to add to their long list of victories. Admiral Tae Young stood on the bridge of his massive flagship, watching as his fleet emerged from hyperspace above the blue planet called Earth. Around him, dozens of warships materialized from the swirling energy of their faster-than-light travel, their dark hulls gleaming with advanced armor and bristling with weapons. This was supposed to be routine. The Admiral had personally overseen 43 planetary conquests during his long career. The pattern was always the same: arrive with overwhelming force, broadcast demands for surrender, and watch as the primitive species below begged for mercy or tried to negotiate terms. Begin standard intimidation protocol, Admiral Tae Young ordered, settling into his command throne. The throne was carved from a single piece of crystal taken from the first world he had conquered, a reminder of his many victories. His communication officer began transmitting the usual message toward Earth: surrender immediately or face complete destruction. The message was sent in multiple frequencies and languages that their computers had decoded from human broadcasts. It was clear, simple, and had never failed to produce the desired result. But something was wrong. Instead of the expected silence or panicked responses from below, Admiral Tae Young's sensor operators began reporting something unprecedented. Energy signatures were lighting up across the planet's surface like a constellation of angry stars. "Sir," Commander Subin called, out from her position at the tactical station, her voice filled with confusion and growing concern. "We're detecting massive energy buildups across all major land masses. These readings are unusual." The Admiral frowned and moved to examine the sensor displays himself. What he saw made no sense according to everything he knew about primitive civilizations. Instead of chaos and terror, the humans were organizing with frightening efficiency. "Are those weapon signatures?" he asked, though he already suspected the answer. "Yes, sir, but not just random defensive positions. Look at the coordination patterns." Subin highlighted sections of her display with trembling fingers. "Every continent is responding simultaneously. This isn't panic. This is a planned military response." Captain Dong Hyun, who commanded the fleet's tactical operations, moved to join them at the sensor station. His experienced eyes quickly analyzed the data, and what he saw made his blood run cold. "Admiral, these launch formations are sophisticated. They're not firing blindly into space hoping to hit something. Look here." He pointed to specific patterns on the screen. "They're calculating our positions, predicting our movement patterns, and coordinating attacks across multiple time zones." As if to prove his point, the planet's surface suddenly lit up like a deadly fireworks display. Thousands of missiles launched simultaneously from hundreds of locations across Earth. The coordination was perfect. Rural areas, cities, hidden military bases, and even civilian locations erupted with rocket exhaust and flame. "This is impossible," Admiral Tae Young muttered, watching the tactical display fill with incoming projectiles. "They've only had our surrender demand for 30 minutes. How could they organize a global response so quickly?" Commander Subin was frantically working her controls, trying to track all the incoming missiles. "Sir, these aren't crude chemical rockets like we expected. Some of these are showing advanced guidance systems and what appears to be nuclear warheads." The reality was slowly sinking in for the HFY officers. This wasn't a panicked last-ditch effort by a desperate species. This was a coordinated military response that had been prepared in advance. Somehow the humans had known they were coming. "Incoming transmission from the planet's surface," reported the communications officer. "Multiple sources, all major population centers." "Put it through," Admiral Tae Young ordered, expecting to finally hear the pleas for mercy he was used to. Instead, what came through the speakers was something no HFY commander had ever heard before in nearly 3 centuries of conquest. Human voices, speaking in dozens of different languages, but delivering the same message with calm, determined authority. General Wu Jin from the Korean peninsula was the first to speak, her voice steady and clear. To the alien forces currently threatening our world, Earth does not surrender. We do not negotiate with invaders. You have made a grave mistake coming here expecting easy prey. Colonel So Young from North America followed immediately. Your demands for submission are rejected. We know what you've done to other worlds, and we will not allow it to happen here. This is our home, and we will defend it to our last breath. Similar messages poured in from every continent. Leaders from Europe, Africa, Asia, Australia, and South America all spoke with the same unwavering resolve. There were no desperate pleas, no offers of compromise, no attempts to buy time through negotiation. Instead, each message ended the same way, a formal declaration of war. Admiral Tae Young stood in stunned silence as the communications continued. In his 43 previous conquests, in the Empire's entire history of 247 successful subjugations, not one species had immediately chosen warfare over submission. Most begged for mercy. Some tried to negotiate. A few attempted futile last stands after being cornered, but none had ever responded to first contact with a coordinated planet-wide declaration of war delivered within minutes of the initial demand. For surrender. Sir, Captain Donghyun said quietly, recommend we raise shields and begin evasive maneuvers. Those missiles will reach us in approximately 8 minutes. The Admiral nodded absently, still staring at the communication displays. Something was fundamentally different about these humans. They weren't acting like a primitive species encountering superior technology for the first time. They were acting like they had been expecting this moment and preparing for it. Intelligence Officer Sung Hwan hurried through the corridors of Admiral Tae Young's flagship, clutching a datapad filled with information that made his hands shake. What he had discovered about the humans in the past few hours had turned everything they thought they knew about this species completely upside down. The command briefing room was filled with tension when he arrived. Admiral Tae Young sat at the head of a polished metal table, surrounded by his most trusted officers. Their faces showed confusion and worry, emotions rarely seen among the confident Kethval military leadership. Report, Admiral Tae Young commanded, his voice betraying none of the uncertainty he felt inside. Sung Hwan activated his datapad, and holographic images filled the air above the table. What appeared were scenes from human history, soldiers, marching, battles raging, weapons firing. But these weren't recent images. Some were hundreds, even thousands of years old. Admiral, I've been analyzing their cultural records, their historical databases, their literature and entertainment, Sung Hwan began, his voice growing stronger as he shared his findings. What I've discovered is unlike anything we've encountered in our previous conquests. He gestured to the floating images, which shifted to show timeline after timeline of human conflicts. These humans have been at war with each other for their entire recorded history, not occasional conflicts over resources or territory, but constant, continuous warfare spanning thousands of years. Lieutenant Jiwoo, the fleet's tactical analyst, leaned forward with interest. She had been studying human military capabilities, and what she had found was equally disturbing. Show them the technological progression data, she said quietly. The holographic display changed to show a fascinating and terrifying pattern. Every major human technological breakthrough was immediately followed by military applications. The discovery of gunpowder led to cannons and firearms. The invention of flight led to fighter aircraft and bombers. The splitting of the atom led to nuclear weapons. Look at this progression, Sung Hwan explained, pointing to specific examples. When humans learned to grow crops more efficiently, they used the surplus population to build larger armies. When they developed better metallurgy, they forged superior weapons. When they created computers, they used them to guide missiles and coordinate battles. Captain Hanul, who commanded the fleet's ground forces, studied the data with growing amazement and horror. This can't be accurate. You're telling me that every single advancement in their civilization has been turned into a weapon? Not just turned into weapons, Lieutenant Jiwoo corrected, pulling up more detailed analysis. In many cases, the military applications came first. Their internet, a global communication system, was originally designed to help their military communicate. During nuclear war, their space program began as a way to deliver weapons across continents. Admiral Tae-young watched the data with a sinking feeling in his stomach. The Kethval had always prided themselves on being a warrior species, but their conflicts had been about expansion and resources. What he was seeing here was something entirely different. Their entertainment media is particularly revealing, Xiong-hwan continued, bringing up examples of human movies, books, and games. They create fictional stories about warfare for pleasure. They simulate battles for entertainment. Children play games that teach them military strategy and combat tactics. The images showed human children playing with toy soldiers, teenagers competing in strategic war games, adults watching movies about epic battles. Even their sports often mimicked combat, boxing, martial arts, team competitions that resembled territorial conflicts. It goes deeper than that, Lieutenant Jiwoo added, her voice growing quieter as she shared the most disturbing discovery. I've been analyzing their military doctrine and strategy. Admiral, they don't see warfare as a necessity or even as a tool for achieving goals. To them, conflict appears to be a natural state of existence. She brought up comparative data showing how different human cultures approached warfare. Every major civilization on their planet developed unique military philosophies, specialized weapons and tactical innovations. They weren't copying each other. They were independently evolving different ways to wage war. Captain Hanoul pointed to specific examples on the display. Look at their historical records. When they weren't fighting external enemies, they fought each other. When they weren't fighting other humans, they developed theoretical strategies for fighting hypothetical enemies. They never stopped preparing for the next conflict. The room fell silent as the implications became clear. Admiral Tae-young had spent his entire career conquering species that viewed warfare as an unfortunate necessity. The Kethval themselves fought when they needed resources or territory, but they didn't glorify combat or make it the center of their culture. Admiral, Xiong-hwan said softly, I believe we've made a fundamental error in our assessment. These humans aren't a primitive species that happens to have some military capability. They're a species that has spent their entire evolutionary history perfecting the art of warfare. Lieutenant Jiwoo nodded in agreement. Every generation has been shaped by conflict. Every technological advance has been tested in battle. Every cultural development has been influenced by the need to survive in a world where war was constant. Holographic display shifted to show recent human history. 2 massive global conflicts in the 20th century alone, involving nearly every nation on the planet. Millions of soldiers, revolutionary new weapons, strategies that had never been seen before. They treat warfare as evolution, Captain Hanoul observed, his voice filled with a mixture of respect and fear. Each conflict teaches them something new, makes them stronger, more adaptable, more dangerous. Admiral Tae-young finally understood the terrible truth that his intelligence officers had uncovered. The Kethval Empire hadn't discovered a primitive world ready for easy conquest. They had found something far more dangerous, a species that had been honing its ability to fight and kill for thousands of years. While the Kethval had been peacefully expanding through superior technology, humans had been locked in an endless cycle of conflict that had forged them into something the galaxy had never seen before, a species where warfare wasn't just a tool or a necessity. For humans, warfare was their greatest cultural achievement. Engineer Kyung-soo had seen many things during his 30 years of service with the Kethval Empire, but nothing had prepared him for what he was witnessing now. Standing in the engineering bay of Admiral Tae-young's flagship, he stared at the analysis reports with a mixture of disbelief and growing dread. 3 weeks ago, a squadron of human fighters had managed to damage one of their smaller escort ships during a skirmish near Earth's moon. The Kethval had considered it a minor victory when they destroyed the human craft, but they had made a critical error. Some debris from their damaged ship had fallen to Earth's surface. "Admiral," Kyung-soo said into his communication device, his voice tight with concern, "you need to see this immediately." Within minutes, Admiral Tae-young arrived in the engineering section, followed by several of his senior officers. The Admiral's face was already showing the strain of commanding what was supposed to have been a simple conquest, but had turned into something far more complex and dangerous. "What have you found?" the Admiral asked, though he suspected he wouldn't like the answer. Kyung-soo activated a holographic display showing detailed scans of Earth's surface. "Sir, we've been monitoring the crash site where our ship debris landed. What the humans have accomplished in just 3 weeks is unprecedented." The display zoomed in on a heavily fortified facility that had appeared seemingly overnight in what used to be an empty desert. Massive buildings, advanced manufacturing, equipment, and thousands of human workers moved with purposeful efficiency. "They've completely reverse-engineered our plasma weapon technology," Kyung-soo continued, his voice growing quieter with each word. "But that's not the worst part. They're not just copying our designs, they're improving them." Admiral Tae-young studied the data with growing alarm. The Kethval plasma weapons had taken their civilization over 2 centuries to develop and perfect. The idea that a primitive species could understand and improve upon such advanced technology in mere weeks seemed impossible. "Show me the improvements," the Admiral ordered. The holographic display shifted to show comparative weapon analyses. Kyung-soo pointed to specific modifications the humans had made. "They've increased the energy output by 15% while reducing the power consumption by 20%. They've also made the weapons smaller and lighter without sacrificing effectiveness." Captain Yoonji, who had been monitoring human communications, stepped forward with her own disturbing reports. "Admiral, it gets worse. They're not keeping these improvements to themselves. Watch this." She activated her own display, showing a complex network of communication channels connecting every major population center on Earth. Within hours of perfecting the weapon modifications, they shared the complete technical specifications with their entire species. Every nation, every military organization, every manufacturing facility now has access to these improved designs. The implications hit Admiral Tae-young like a physical blow. In Kethval society, advanced military technology was carefully guarded and shared only among trusted allies after years of political negotiation. The humans were treating their greatest military secrets like public information. They're sharing everything instantly, Captain Yoonji continued, her voice filled with barely concealed fear. New tactical strategies, weapon improvements, manufacturing techniques. The moment one group learns something, the entire species knows about it within hours. Meanwhile, on Earth's surface, Colonel Jae-hyun was coordinating the most massive industrial transformation in human history. Standing in what had been a civilian automobile factory just 1 month earlier, he watched as production lines that once built family cars now assembled advanced plasma weapons at an incredible pace. "Status report," he spoke into his communication headset, connecting him to similar facilities around the globe. The responses came rapidly from every continent. "Factory complex Alpha operational, producing 200 units per day. Manufacturing, Hub Beta exceeding targets by 30%. Production Facility Gamma requesting additional raw materials to increase output." Colonel Jae-hyun smiled grimly as he updated the Global Defense Council. Every civilian manufacturing plant on the planet has been converted to weapons production. Automobile factories are building armored vehicles. Electronics plants are producing targeting systems. Even food processing facilities have been modified to manufacture ammunition components. The transformation wasn't just impressive, it was terrifying in its efficiency. Human society had reorganized itself for total war in a matter of weeks, converting every aspect of their civilization into a weapon against the Kethval invasion. Back on the Admiral's flagship, Engineer Kyung-soo was sharing even more disturbing news. "Sir, they're not just improving our plasma weapons, they're combining our technology with their own in ways we never considered." The display showed human weapons that merged Kethval energy technology with human ballistic systems, creating hybrid weapons that were more effective than either original design. "They're thinking outside our established technological frameworks," Kyung-soo explained. "Where we see limitations, they see opportunities for innovation." Admiral Tae-young realized he was facing a strategic nightmare. His first instinct was, to call for reinforcements. More ships, more weapons, more firepower to overwhelm the surprisingly resilient humans. But as he considered this option, he understood the terrible trap he was in. "Captain Yunji," he said slowly, "if I bring more ships into this system, what will happen to any technology the humans manage to capture?" She consulted her analysis of human behavior patterns. "Based on their demonstrated capabilities, sir, they would reverse engineer and improve upon any new technology within weeks, then share those improvements across their entire species within hours." The Admiral felt a chill run down his spine. Every additional Kethval ship he brought to Earth would potentially provide the humans with more advanced technology to steal, study, and turn against the Empire. Instead of reinforcements making his position stronger, they might actually make the humans more dangerous. "They're treating this entire conflict as a learning opportunity," Captain Yunji observed with growing dread. "Every battle teaches them something new. Every piece of our technology they capture makes them more capable. Every tactical exchange adds to their understanding of how to fight us more effectively." For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Tae-young found himself in a situation where requesting additional forces might be the worst possible strategic decision. The humans had turned the very concept of military escalation into a weapon against their enemies. They weren't just fighting the Kethval Empire. They were learning from them, growing stronger with each encounter and becoming more dangerous. With every passing day, Admiral Tae-young stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring through the cracked viewing window at the blue planet that had become his greatest nightmare. What had started as a routine conquest 6 months ago had turned into the most devastating military disaster in Kethval history. His once mighty fleet was reduced to barely functional ships, held together by emergency repairs and desperation. The damage wasn't just to his vessels, it was to everything the Kethval Empire had believed about itself and its place in the galaxy. For 3 centuries, they had been the apex predators of space, the unquestioned masters of military technology and strategic thinking. Now, they were being systematically dismantled by a species they had initially dismissed as primitive. "Commander," Yonwoo approached with the latest tactical assessment, her face grim with the weight of impossible decisions. "Admiral, our analysts have completed their strategic review. Given our current situation and the humans' continued advancement, we have only 2 viable options remaining." Admiral Tae-young turned from the window, knowing he wouldn't like either choice. "Present them." "Complete planetary annihilation using our remaining orbital bombardment capabilities," Commander Yonwoo began, her voice steady despite the horror of what she was suggesting. "We could render Earth uninhabitable within hours, eliminating the human threat entirely." The Admiral nodded grimly. It was the nuclear option, literally. The Kethval possessed weapons capable of cracking planets, turning entire worlds into lifeless rocks floating in space. It was a tactic they had used only twice in their long history, against species that posed existential threats to the Empire. "The alternative?" he asked, though he suspected he already knew. "Full retreat from this system and the surrounding sectors. We abandon any attempt to conquer or contain the humans and hope they remain focused on their own territory." Admiral Tae-young considered both options, but before he could respond, Colonel Hee-jin burst onto the bridge with an expression of pure panic. As the fleet's intelligence coordinator, she had been monitoring human communications around the clock, and what she had just discovered changed everything. "Admiral, we have a critical situation," she announced, activating the main display screen. "I've been tracking human scientific communications, and they've achieved something we thought impossible." The screen filled with intercepted data from human research facilities, complex mathematical equations, engineering blueprints, and test results scrolled past in a dizzying array of information that made Admiral Tae-young's blood run cold. "They've cracked faster than light travel," Colonel Hee-jin announced, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Bo Young, their lead physicist, transmitted the complete specifications to research teams worldwide just 3 hours ago. The bridge fell into stunned silence. Faster-than-light travel was the most closely guarded technology in the galaxy. The Kethval had spent centuries developing their hyperspace drives, and the technology was so complex that most species never achieved it independently. Yet somehow, the humans had reverse-engineered and improved upon Kethval FTL technology. In mere months. "Show me their current activities," Admiral Tae-Young ordered, though he dreaded what he might see. The display shifted to show real-time observations of Earth's solar system. What they saw confirmed their worst fears. Hidden facilities throughout the system were launching sleek advanced spacecraft that bore little resemblance to the primitive chemical rockets the humans had been using just months earlier. Captain Namjoon, who had been tracking human fleet movements, provided the devastating update. "Sir, we count at least 50 vessels of unknown design launching from concealed bases on Earth, Mars, and several asteroids. Their energy signatures suggest they're equipped with both our plasma technology and FTL drives." Admiral Tae-Young realized that both of his strategic options had just become meaningless. Orbital bombardment would no longer contain the human threat. They already had ships capable of escaping the solar system, and retreat was pointless if human forces could follow them anywhere in the galaxy. The transformation that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Within months, human expeditionary forces began appearing in star systems throughout Kethval space. But these weren't conquest fleets in the traditional sense. They were something far more dangerous to the established galactic order. General Sojin led the first human liberation fleet to Kepler 442b, a world the Kethval had conquered decades earlier. The native Zephyrians had been reduced to slave labor, mining rare crystals for the Empire's war machine. When human ships arrived in orbit, the Zephyrians expected simply to exchange one set of masters for another. Instead, General Sujin did something unprecedented in galactic history. She didn't conquer the planet, she liberated it. Human forces destroyed the Kethval garrison, freed the enslaved population, and then did something that shocked the galaxy. They began teaching the Zephyrians how to fight. "We're not here to rule you," General Sujin announced to the assembled Zephyrian leaders. "We're here to teach you how to rule yourselves, how to defend yourselves, how to ensure that no one ever enslaves your people again." The pattern repeated across dozens of worlds. Human liberation fleets would arrive, eliminate Kethval forces, and then establish military academies, weapons factories, and training centers. They shared their technology freely, taught advanced combat tactics, and helped former slave species build their own defense forces. The Kethval Empire, which had taken 3 centuries to build, began crumbling with shocking speed. World after world declared independence, armed with human weapons and trained in human military doctrine. Species that had been conquered generations ago suddenly possessed the tools and knowledge to fight back against their former masters. Admiral Tae-Young found himself writing what he knew would be his final report to the Kethval High Command. His hands shook as he composed the words that would officially mark the end of an era. "To the Supreme Council of the Kethval Empire," he began, "I must report the complete failure of our subjugation mission and the collapse of imperial authority in the outer sectors. We have made a fundamental error in our assessment of the species known as humans." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "We did not discover a primitive species suitable for conquest. We found a weapons manufacturer that had been perfecting its craft for millennia. The humans do not simply wage war. They have turned warfare itself into their greatest cultural export." The report continued with details of human technological advancement, their unprecedented approach to military cooperation, and their systematic liberation of Kethval territories. But the conclusion was simple and terrifying. The galaxy will never be the same. Captain Young-ho stood on the bridge of humanity's first purpose-built interstellar dreadnought, watching as the latest group of liberated worlds joined what was being called the Free Worlds Alliance. Earth's greatest export was spreading across the stars, but it wasn't conquest or domination. It was the knowledge of how to fight for freedom and the tools to make that fight successful. The galactic balance of power had shifted permanently, and at the center of it all was a blue planet whose inhabitants had turned their greatest weakness, their endless capacity for warfare, into the galaxy's greatest strength.